Hi, this is Ed Cohen coming to you today from San Diego, California, and our special focused guest today on Global TV talk show is Rob Fletcher, coming to us, as you can see, from London. And has a great picture of St. Paul's behind us. So let's say hi to Rob Fletcher. Hi.
Hi, Ed, how are you?
Yeah,
Thank you for
good.
inviting us to be on your show, and it's a pleasure to be here, particularly on this special day as it's your birthday.
I know, it's still kicking. So Rob, that's a beautiful Zoom picture behind you, or is that the picture outside your window?
I wish if I owned a piece of real estate that gave me this view, I probably wouldn't need to be having this conversation right now. I'd be
Yeah, I
having
get you.
different conversations with different people. So yeah, I'm afraid this is a green screen Zoom picture.
Yeah, okay, good. So can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
All right, that's great. I hear you too. All right, so we're going to have a conversation. I'd like to learn about, as I adjust my screen here a little bit, I'd like to learn from you how you are handling the interruption and the risk. Now, for instance, just so you know, my business has been for several years primarily producing live conferences in different places. For instance, between January 1 and the end of February, I produced live training meetings in Seattle and San Francisco, San Jose, LA, New York, and Washington, D.C. Now, all of that live in-person stuff has poof, evaporated. And so I've been reinventing our business into what you see here today. I call it Global TV Talk Show, which is a virtual conference, if you will. Some of them are one-on-one conversations like this, and we might be joined by a couple of others. And others could have 9, 10, even 15 or 20 people on the show.
Sure.
So it's a matter of speaking up and having something to say that the whole world needs to know about you. So tell us today, now, Rob, about today's heart relocation. It's a great name, and I know we got to have heart in dealing with this crisis. And how are you getting on? Let's hear from you. And I've got some other questions.
Sure. So, as you may recall, we're a startup relocation company, a relocation management company, and we officially started trading for business on the 2nd of January 2020. So we're pretty fresh and new. Now we're lucky that in the period of time as we kind of prepared to open our doors, we had a number of customers that liked the messages that we were sending out and kind of joined us. So we had activity, we have clients that are moving people around the world, but it's not a significant number. We're not a massive organization with hundreds of thousands of employees. And so when COVID came, our business literally in a week went from hero to zero. And for the next 12 weeks, we may as well not have had a business. Now, obviously you can sit and wring your hands and think, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But we took the opportunity of spending time training ourselves, doing more in terms of our business and the setup of our business. We were lucky enough to be involved in a number of RFPs during that time, because I think a lot of clients took the opportunity to say, okay, well, we've not much else to do right now, so let's go out and see what's benchmark and see what's in the marketplace. And we're seeing some benefits from that activity right now. So we've kind of kept ourselves busy. From our clients' perspective, we've seen all kinds of reactions from those clients that have just continued to send people and dealt with the consequences of sending them, dealt with the complications of sending them. And I think where that is critical, we saw it in the pharma industry where people had to move. That was part of the COVID response. We've seen, I spoke to an organization today that literally repatriated every single assignee. So every single assignee that they had in March is now back in their home location, and they're evaluating whether they send them back out again. I think, my view is we went through 3 pretty tough months. I think it's been tough on everybody. I think there are certain sectors and certain industries, yours, for example, which necessitates lots of people gathering in one place and sharing ideas and thoughts, has probably suffered the most, as hospitality, etc. I think others, certainly, areas of the entertainment industry, have actually benefited and done really well. Online shopping, etc. The food retailers, they've all done, they're posting world record results for them as organizations. So it's changed the dynamic of the world a bit. But, as we see lockdown start to ease in the UK over the last few days, we're seeing old habits re-emerge. There are pictures on the news yesterday as they opened all the retail outlets where there are long queues and lots of people desperate to get into a shop and buy things. And I think, people want to get back to some sense of normal. I get that for sure.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question about some clients without divulging any names. We don't need that. But I do want to get some info, some intelligence briefing, if you will. Did companies bring back people and then have to spend more money because the transferee's home was not available suddenly, and they had to stay in hotels or apartments?
So I spent quite a lot of time talking to this particular company today, and they had some real issues. They were breaking leases in the locations that they were leaving and having to pay quite large penalties to the landlords. And I guess, no landlord is going to see their tenant evaporate, and there's no new tenants coming into the marketplace, so their property's going to sit empty for a month. So the landlords were pretty emphatic that they wanted to get paid for the term of the rent, and that company was actually willing to do that because they wanted to see their employees home and safe. And if they were coming back and they had rented out their property for the duration of their assignment, they clearly couldn't move back into their own property, so they'd gone into rented accommodation themselves. So it was a pretty complex exercise. I think it's the only company I've seen or even heard of that's taken that drastic action. I mean, there may be others that I've just not heard of. I think others have been a bit more pragmatic in their approach. If somebody's on assignment, they've sought to help them. But one of the scary, it's not shocking is a word, and I think it is a shocking statistic, but I don't think I'm necessarily shocked by it, if that makes any sense. I think Pivot did a survey of assignees around COVID and the impact it had had on them. And the numbers were quite revealing. I think, quoting off the top of my head, I think that the assignees who were surveyed said only 57% of them had heard anything from their employer since the onset of the coronavirus crisis.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
I find it quite shocking, because it means 43 out of 100 assignees have not even heard from their employer. 37% of them had heard nothing from anybody. And the bit, is most relevant to me because I'm in that space, was that only 5% had heard from the relocation management company that moved them.
So were those people who hadn't heard anything, it's one of those things we've heard about in the relo business, sight unseen, and they forgot about them, and yet they're probably still getting paid.
Yeah, gone and forgotten, right? That's kind of, I've moved you, I've forgotten about you. And in 3 years' time, you'll come back or you'll go somewhere else. But in the intervening period, I've kind of forgotten about you. So, I think it was shocking. I'm hoping that was a realistic piece of work. I'm certainly speaking to Lynn. I think, it was a fairly large statistical sample. So I think it's fairly reflective of the marketplace. But I think it's quite shocking because, the one thing that people need in times of crisis, the crisis that we're going through right now, is reassurance, is communication, is an understanding of what do I need to do? How am I going to cope?
Yeah, we're in this together.
How am I going to deal with this? And I think, particularly if you're an assignee in a foreign country, and particularly if you're an assignee who's only recently gone to a foreign country, how do you deal with the things that you need to deal with when you don't have the knowledge, the local tools to be able to deal with those things? So I think, the one thing that COVID will teach us going forward is to be more appreciative of each other. I think we will go back to some of the old ways, but I think there'll be an underlying improvement in considering people's well-being.
Yeah. So now, what do you think about business travel? Do you get into that at all? Are you involved in the servicing at all of business travel?
Yes, and we have a business tracker tool within our technology system that a number of our clients use. And business travel is really interesting because right now it's a challenge. You need to go somewhere for a meeting. You've got to sit in quarantine for 14 days, and the quarantine rules change from country to country, and it's not always 14 days, and some are more lax than others. But where there are rules, they're pretty strict. I mean, coming into the UK, you have to self-quarantine for 14 days. You can't leave the house, not even to walk a dog. It's just not allowed. And so I'm not going to spend 14 days to go to a business meeting. If you dig into the rules country by country, and I think there are lots of websites that give you all of the details, international SOS, etc. They will talk about there are special cases where you can, if you're coming for a specific reason in a specific industry for a specific role, you might get a 96-hour pass that you don't need to quarantine, but you come and then you go again. So
yeah. So we're being joined by a couple of people. First on is Tracy Barboza, who's from New York City, and she's in corporate lodging. Tracy, you're welcome to speak up and introduce yourself to Rob Fletcher, who's in London.
Hello, hi, Tracy.
Okay, so we'll wait for her. So Rob, about business travel, it seems that there's a pent-up demand for sure, and yet everybody's concerned, fearful of getting sick or contracting something and bringing it home. So clean and safe and trustworthy, this is like, whoa, this is like out of sight, over the top requirements. Clean, safe, and is it trustworthy? Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think, the airlines are the one, because, airlines ultimately are the facilitators of business travel, global business travel. And I think, the lengths that they're going to in order to make us feel safe are extraordinary. And I think, if you think about, where I want to expose myself right now, if I'm at home, I'm okay. I'm in control of my own environment. If I'm outside in the park walking, I feel free. I don't feel like I'm going to come into contact. The minute that I go into an enclosed space, that's when I want to put on my mask. That's when I'm, I don't touch things with my hands. I wear gloves. I move things around with my elbows, and absolutely. And you've got a hole in that one, Ed. You may want to not use that one anymore.
I have to breathe.
And I think, then people think about getting on a tube or a metro, which is a closed-in space, in an enclosed-in space, breathing other people's airs. And I think that's when they get really quite kind of nervous about it. And an aeroplane is, I'm going to sit on a plane for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, effectively enclosed in a metal capsule, breathing everybody's air. I think, I've read quite a lot about this because I want to obviously give my clients the best advice. And the air purifying systems in airplanes are probably the best in the world, absolutely. And they use a lot of ozone in the cleaning, which is, there are companies now that will go and do fogging in premises, in your car, in your home, in office space. And that's all about converting the oxygen into ozone, which kills the bacteria and kind of creates a safe space.
So are you seeing that being done in corporate apartments in the UK?
Certainly. We have a program to support people coming in for the period of quarantine. And one of those things is making sure that the space they go into is exactly what you've said, safe, clean and trustworthy. And part of that is making sure that they get deep cleaned. And there are these portable fogging machines now that you can put in an apartment or a hotel room, leave it running for a couple of hours, leave it, because you can't be in the same room because it's injurious to your health. But once you're in and it's done and finished, then you can go in and be fairly confident that every surface you touch is clean.
Yeah, especially in an apartment or corporate lodging place. You're going to sit in a chair you don't know anything about. You're going to get into a bed you don't know anything about. So hello, Tracy. Welcome.
Hi, Tracy.
Oh, hi, thank you.
So
Good
Tracy, this is
evening, good morning.
Rob Fletcher is in London, and Tracy's in the New York area. Are you in Times Square?
I'm not in Times Square today. We actually are putting our office on hold before coming in. I'm actually right over the Hudson River onto the Jersey side, so my house kind of faces the World Trade Center. So I'm just right over the river.
Yeah, nice view. So we're talking about back to business travel as part of Relo and how companies are thinking about it. So I welcome your input and discussion here. We're talking about clean and safe and trustworthy. I'm sure you guys are into that in your units, right?
Yeah, we have to be at this point. And if you're not, I think we'll be in trouble at this right now. Everybody has to be CDC compliant. We've actually held training certification from COVID-19, and we've all taken this as a almost like a learning lesson and making sure that everything is a little more sanitized than normal. So our corporate offices are based in London, and we actually posted on LinkedIn to show that the majority of our team that's working right now doing and managing our own stock has taken this COVID-19 certification training that's all about sanitation and making sure we're all within guidelines. You know, it's so important to do this. And I think it's also important, you know, for people to entrust, again, that if they are going into, like you had mentioned, you know, into the bedroom and, you know, knowing that somebody had, you know, maybe slept in that bed, making sure that that it's sanitized and making sure that we're keeping everyone safe and healthy. So it's definitely important. But I am excited today because Newark Airport is not too far from me. And I've been seeing, it must have been today, at least 10 airplanes. And that to me tells me, I don't know what it is about Tuesday. It traveled Tuesday, right? But 10 airplanes today is
That's
huge.
Good. Yeah, that's very
you know,
good.
It's been so quiet. Now we definitely hear them. So that tells me that travel is ramping up a little bit.
So what's the name of your company that's based in London? Because Rob Fletcher is London-based also.
So the company is called The Square. It's the Square Service Departments. I'm not sure if you're familiar with us. We have
I get your emails all the time. So.
Yeah, well, that's good. I'm glad you're on our list. But yeah, we're based right in London, and I'm here in New York City. Our office is on West 41st Street in New York City, and I handle the Americas team.
Rob, tell Tracy more about your company, about Heart Relocation.
Yeah, so we're a startup relocation management company. We effectively opened our doors for business on the 2nd of January this year. So we're very young, but we're making a difference. We're gaining traction, winning business, starting to move people around the world. Based in the west of London, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes north of Heathrow Airport. And I have to say, what you just said about the aeroplanes was quite had kind of rang a lot of resonance for me, because when we locked down, literally the skies above our house were clear, and bearing in mind we are 15 minutes from Heathrow Airport, there was never a time you couldn't look up and see 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 aircraft in going, coming and circling, and it was really odd. I mean, it was almost back to the Icelandic volcano kind of, no air travel for months, and every airplane was grounded. But now you're seeing more and more and more, and even people that live under the flight path that complain bitterly about the noise from aircraft are all saying, "Oh, it's great to hear the aircraft back again."
Yeah, so, it's very true. Yeah, I never thought I'd say that.
Yeah. So Tracy, what's going on in the city, in the New York market? Things are picking up a little.
They're slowly picking up. So we're in phase 2 right now. So we still don't have very many restaurants, but that are open. But as far as corporate clients that we've seen, a lot of them right now are asking for pricing, but it's more or less pricing to prepare when things are a little bit more safe. I think from what I've spoken to some corporate clients is that they're restructuring some of the offices. It seems that a lot of people are going to continue to work from home, but they do need some people to manage some of, the office operations daily. But they're also rearranging the structure of how everybody is going to be seated. So I think corporations are preparing for it. We've been working also alongside with a lot of RMCs. The business that I've been seeing that's coming into New York right now has been mostly healthcare and government. We've had some technology companies as well, but I think all of that will pick up across America as we're opening up, because those are kind of the essential workers. I mean, other than that, I went into Times Square probably about a week and a half ago. We have it's called the Manhattan Edge, where you're on West 42nd Street, and it's when the sun is setting and it goes right in between the buildings and it just gleams. So when I went there, I was surprised to see the amount of tourists that were actually there, because I saw people hanging out by the hotels. I saw it wasn't as busy, of course, as a regular Saturday, but there was a lot of people on the street. There's a lot of motion. I saw people hanging out at Bryant Park, and I was very surprised. That was a week and a half ago, and here we are. I just feel like we're getting more and more busy, and people are getting more comfortable, wearing their mask and understanding that is the expectation now when you're walking in the streets of New York City is to wear a mask. But, we all have hope that the travel will, increase as well, and to bring in a lot of the global mobility programs back and the internships, hopefully in the new year, but, we'll see.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that report. It's valuable information, not only for Rob and me, but this talk show is being recorded, and we're going to have it on our Global TV website in a couple of days for free access 24/7 worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And then it will link to the YouTube channel we have as well. So it will be seen 3 months from now, as well as today, by some people. So I also want to let you know, and I'll follow up in writing with an invitation, that this coming Friday at 9 a.m. California time, 5 p.m. London, we're hosting a very special program on business travel. And it's called Back to Business Travel. And we have an expert who has spoken as a headliner at the GBTA, which is Global Business Travel Association Convention. And he's an author, Scott Gillespie. And I'm interviewing him, and we're going to have others on the program. I invite you to come on also, perhaps ask a question. It's free, complimentary, and more about that later. So let me ask you, Rob Fletcher, in your contacts with others in the relocation industry in and around London area, for instance, from your old friends at Santa Fe and other places, is it the same kind of outlook? Are they in about the same position, do you think?
So, yeah, it's a great question. And I think, every organization has dealt with this crisis slightly differently, and rightly so, because every organization is different, and how the shape of you when you went in may determine how you deal with the shape of how you deal with it and the shape that you come out. I think, without naming any names, I think, certainly you can see by the activity, who's posting I'm available on LinkedIn, who wasn't available previously, that there is some movement, that certainly some people are getting laid off in some organizations. That has to be, a sign that they've not had the activity, and they've, having to cut their cloth to meet their kind of income streams. We hear, we're actually interviewing for a role at the moment because we're hiring, and we're hearing from candidates that in some of the organizations that they're working in, 90% of their employees are furloughed right now. So they're clearly struggling and suffering. And, I guess, as a startup, we're lucky our infrastructure costs are small. We don't have massive overheads. So we're kind of quite able to be lithe and quick-footed in this crisis. And if I'm a big organization with a massive overhead bill, that's going to be much tougher for me to negotiate.
Right. And high stress, that's for sure. What we've been doing is trying to be helpful with complimentary services like this thing. We've been doing it for the past 6 weeks or so.
Yeah.
About 6 weeks ago, I launched my first ever video talk conference or whatever this is. And I still don't know what I'm doing, but we're trying to make it look right. And so I thank you for participating in this. We want to do 50 or more broadcasts between now and Christmas, just keeping people together at no charge whatsoever to discuss issues. We will survive on sponsorships, but those will be low cost. We just want to do a lot of things so we could get better at all of this and give everybody a microphone to speak up.
Yeah, and I think people need that right now. I think people need that sense of connection. I think they need to hear from other people. I can't walk into an office or into a meeting and give people a hug and shake their hands and all the kissing and stuff that we're lucky to get away with in Europe. that we can't be doing that right now, and it's probably some time before we're ever, if at all, ever able to do that again. And I think people need a sense of community. And I think, you've seen it. You've seen, the explosion of Zoom and meetings. I think they're tough to deal with. I think you can only remain focused for a shorter period of time. When you're in a live meeting, you can take breaks, you can go and, you can move around, you can do all the kinds of things that you become much more focused. I think that Zoom, the one thing with Zoom is that we can also become quite narcissistic, because you never go into a meeting looking at yourself talking. Unless you go to a meeting with a mirror company and you might be catching yourself out of the corner of your eye in a mirror, you never spend an hour and a half watching yourself speak.
I know, God.
We're all kind of going, oh, but this is still...
You're so true. It's so true.
The one thing I think is quite funny that I've noticed is that I've never been to a meeting in my life where at the end of the meeting, everybody says, bye, which is kind of what we all do on Zoom. We all wave at each other.
I know. So, so the other day we had a media training meeting with a former actress in New York, Robin Hatcher. And so she's transformed herself over the years to be a professional media trainer. And so she was our leader for about an hour. And we had 10 or 11 on the show with her, and all of them were alpha type A personalities. So I didn't have to do much talking at all. And it was really a lot of fun. Actually, it was quite educational about holding your head and not looking at the other person, but focusing in on that. Like I'm looking at this green camera right now, rather than looking at you. I hope you don't mind. But the idea is that you lock your hands down so you don't scratch your nose or, touch your eyes or whatever, because the camera captures everything. And the lighting is important. Like, for instance, Tracy, you should have a small light bulb in front of you so we can see your beautiful smile. And like I've got this thing right here. You can see this. It's too bright, so I put it down a little bit. But there's light underneath, shining up rather than on top looking down. And that is just one tip that Robin told us. And we all went around the room, around the thing, and everybody got to talk extemporaneously on camera. And then she was critical, and she was also very instructive about what to do better and what to think about. So a lot of it is preparation to be on camera. And that means, well, you don't have to look like Melania Trump, but it's good to freshen up and like, for instance, I comb my hair and I brush my teeth. I know you can't tell the difference from London, but
I can, definitely. And to be fair, I don't think the Melania Trump look would look good on you anyway. So I think you're okay.
No, it's the mask. Yeah. So, Rob, what do you think the first meeting will be for you? The first in-person, in-touch meeting?
It'll be interesting. I think I think it's really interesting. I mean, we did an RFP presentation a few weeks ago. It's the first time I've ever done a formal RFP presentation from my kitchen, because that was pretty much where we got the best light and the best angle to do everything.
Yeah, well, things get done in the kitchen, right?
It was a little surreal, I have to tell you. I'm quite a gregarious person. I can't wait to get back in a room with people and sit around a table and share a joke and a smile and that interaction that you can only get when you're in the physical presence of somebody. When that will be, hard for me to tell right now. I'm hoping it's not too far away in the future, but it's hard to tell. And interestingly, as we've kind of opened up in the UK, so yesterday, all of the retail units were allowed to open again. So not the non-essential stuff. The non-essential stuff was allowed to open. So department stores and clothes shops and technology stores, they were all allowed to open again yesterday. Big crowds, and you saw the pictures on the news of long queues of people all within 2 inches of each other, many of whom without masks, all kind of waiting to go in and buy clothes because they haven't been able to do it for 3 months. So that was kind of interesting. But for me, having been kind of locked down for 3 months, the thought of getting out of my house and going to the office was actually quite scary. I shocked myself and I guess it's a bit like that, I'm sure some people have done studies on this of, that kind of syndrome where you've been locked in a room for so long that you've given up trying to open the door. And then when somebody's opened the door, even though you've been dreaming of leaving, as soon as the door is open, you go, well, that's a bit scary. I'm not sure I want to go out there. Yeah. And you just sit looking at the open door. Day 2, it was much easier to leave home and go into the office.
Yeah. So Tracy was at one of the last meetings I produced. It was February 25 in Times Square, and then the very last one was February 27 down in Washington, and then that was it. Nothing since. The IAM, the International Association of Movers, is scheduled to be held here in San Diego. I live just across the street from the Hyatt in Seaport Village, San Diego, and that's where the meeting is supposedly going to be held. And that's just before the ERC in Washington. So this is across the country here in San Diego. And as far as I know, ERC Washington in late October is still scheduled, but we'll see what happens. Incidentally, on July...
That's interesting.
Yeah. So on July 8, coming up July 8, I am producing a global telecast as well. And it will be talking about meetings and what's going to be happening. And a lot has to do with US-bound relocations post-COVID, or whatever it's called, the new now, I guess. And so one of our segments of that 2-hour broadcast is going to be chaired by ERC. And I got 2 speakers. First of all, Lynn Shotwell, the new CEO, will address the audience about what's ERC up to this summer and what it looks like for the fall. And then our other ERC speaker is the new VP of US government relations, in other words, professional lobbying. So Rebecca Stevens is a professional lobbyist, and she's now VP with ERC, in charge of the government relations. And when she was with SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management in Washington. She had the same job. And incidentally, that's where Lynn Shotwell came from. So I see interesting and a very aggressive approach ERC will be taking going forward, particularly if there is a new administration in Washington. And maybe even with the current one, but definitely if the Democrats win. So there'll be tremendous investment, sort of like a New Deal program. I'm personally just calling it the New Now because there's a lot of infrastructure in the US that needs to go on, and that's tons of money, and engineering and construction and home building and technology upgrading and education resources to get everybody who's laid off into new training, reskilling, retraining. So all of that has to do with getting government backing, if you will, with potentially new tax breaks for the relocation industry in the US. And that will create in my view, a boomtown effect for US relocations. Anyway, July 8th, we're going to be discussing that. And one of my speakers on July 8th is from London. And I want to invite you, Rob, to consider joining us again. I'll send you the info.
Perfect.
So the speaker I have is based in London. He's a publisher of FDI, Foreign Direct Investment. Mm-hmm. He asked me to write an article about recovery, business recovery and reinventing. And so I did that and he published it. So in return, I've invited him to come on the program and to give us his perspective of foreign direct investment in the new economy going forward from a London perspective. And so I'd like to supplement that with you, Rob, and perhaps if you know of others I should reach out to in the UK to also invite. Tracy, I certainly welcome you as well to join that conversation. There will be others from corporate lodging, as you can imagine. But we want to make it an important day. That's July 8th. And the time is California time from 9 to 11. So New York, it's 12 to 1. London, 5 to 6. But more about that.
Thanks, Ed.
Oh, yeah, more about that later, though. So, Rob, about companies in the London area in the UK, I've read that BP and some other energy companies are just been wildly impacted by the crazy swings in pricing for energy. But we all know that the price of oil has, after it crashed, it's back up, like almost 100% growth. It's crazy. Yet they're still planning on laying off some people. And this is a huge employer, isn't it?
I mean, you know, London is a really big city. I mean, it's one of the mega cities of the world, and so there is no one employer that has such an impact on the infrastructure that it's going to make a big difference. It may make some difference in the local economy, not the same way as, you know, the big steel mills shutting down in a steel town and lays off, you know, 50% of the working population of that town. You know, that's going to have a massive effect. So London, it kind of absorbs those things pretty well, and it doesn't really fluctuate the market so much. I think, you know, it is a really interesting time because, you know, there are, you know, many million employees who are currently furloughed. So these are employees that are earning a salary, whether that's 80% paid by the government or 100% because they get the 20% topped up by their current employer, who are wondering whether they're going to actually have a job to go back to. We have started to see quite a number of layoffs across pretty much every company, you know, and I may be cynical and I may be getting a bit long in the tooth and a bit old. And, you know, you wonder how many of these layoffs would have happened anyway, had COVID not happened, how many companies are maybe taking a bit of a moment of opportunity to restructure and re-engineer their companies using COVID as a handy, it's not my fault, it's COVID's excuse. And that would be terribly cynical of me, but I'm sure there are probably companies out there that are doing some of that. And I think there are, clearly, when you look across the hospitality market into hotels and other spaces, that they're literally, their businesses have been wiped out. The events industry, in the space that we work in, there are a number of small startup organizations. There were a couple of companies that were doing events type things, parties and holidays. Those offices are empty now. They've gone, and they're not coming back because they just couldn't. Their business was wiped out literally overnight.
So a lot of that is a big problem, and those of us who've been in the relocation-related industry for a number of years, like us, all of us here, we know that it's deep, and there's a lot of different angles, a lot of different positions, which may only be temporary, but at least it's a bridge into what's next. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've seen a lot of people, places like supermarkets, the kind of the retail food market, manufacturers, farming, they're all desperate for employees right now. And you saw obviously with all of the layoffs and the furloughing within the airline industry, tens of thousands of people with no work. They're all posting on LinkedIn that they've got a job at Morrison's or Safeway or the local supermarket as a customer representative, stacking shelves because they want to come and work and it feels like it's customer service. And those organisations have been desperate because they haven't been able to cope with the upsurge in demand. To create a clean, safe space for people to come and shop in, but also the online demand and the pickers that are needed to do that. But is that sustainable? Those jobs, I think, will melt away as the world returns into whatever the new normal looks like. I don't think people are going to be demanding quite so much of those establishments, and they won't need as many employees as they now have. So, I think there's going to be a reset of the balance. The airline industry will come back. We will all want to get on planes. People want to go on vacation. People want to get on planes and go on business trips. We will all get back on planes. I mean, it's just a question of how long it takes us. And so those jobs will come back for sure.
So Tracy, what do you think about the corporate lodging business?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. What do I think about the
corporate lodging business? It grew so fast. Now what? I
mean, right now, that's a interesting question, because I feel like if you have your own stock right now, that a lot of people have dwindled some of their inventory, that has caused a lot of people to be on furlough. I think that the Square has been very cautious in expanding from the London side into the Americas. So we have a combination where we do have managed stock here, but it's very limited. But we do have several partnerships, and we do partner with management buildings directly. So I think we've been very cautious about this from the beginning. So this has kind of helped us where we haven't been in the red, so to speak. I mean, in the last few months, we've been very, kind of flat. But I think overall, it's been kind of sad because you've had some people that have, I've worked with Bridge Street for a while, and it was kind of sad because they managed a lot of their own stock where, the rents are on the higher side, especially in some of the cities that they were in, New York, San Francisco, Chicago. And it was unfortunate that they are no longer, here, along with Oakwood. And, I've heard stories about Blue Ground and Zeus Living, where they've been negotiating a lot of the rents. I think that the corporate housing business will continue to be around. I think right now we're on the slower side, and people in the future will be more cautious about how much inventory and where they'll take this inventory in the future, and make sure that they will make adjustments based on the client's needs. And I think, that's where we're at right now as well. But I do have some clients that have kind of taken out of their hotel program and put them into corporate housing, because they feel that corporate housing is a little bit more contained, and they feel safer having everything kind of on their own. Where they felt in the hotel, if they have a large group in a hotel where they're staying there, even if it's just for 30 days, their fear is that because of the commingling of everybody, that you have tourists, you have, several other organizations, and you have conventions and everything, that, the conversation I had with someone was that, we're probably not going to move forward with utilizing hotels as much as we are, and going towards more corporate housing to ensure the safety of others.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because I think as you go through, and specifically around the 14-day, 7-day, 20-day quarantine rules around the world right now, there are a lot of governments, authorities that are stipulating that you cannot go into quarantine in a hotel, because for exactly what you've just described. I
Right.
think it's too much of an open space for people to mingle and perhaps contaminate each other. So they're very specific that if you're going to go into quarantine, you're coming to my country, you're going to go into quarantine, you need to go into a private home. And I think that's where serviced accommodation will come into play in a much more way, because I think it's your safe. As you said right earlier on, it's safe, clean, secure, and that's
Right.
That's
And
what people are craving right now. They want to feel safe and secure, that it's clean and secure for them.
And not as much traffic. I think that was what one of the other managers has mentioned to me, is that the amount of traffic in a hotel where you have hundreds of hotel rooms versus an entire building, it would be less traffic, less traffic on the elevator, less traffic on the lobby. You have typically doorman services, so you're not opening the door, or you have electric doors, and then, in the cities that we're in at least. But, I think that was kind of some of the points that they had brought up as well.
Interesting talk. So thank you very much for being my guest today. And I'd like you to come back and participate. And I'll keep you guys informed, okay? And so Rob Fletcher,
Thanks, Ed.
Heart Relocation, what is your website?
www.heartrelocation.com. It's very simple. You can even type in Heart Relo and you'll find us as well. And we've got lots of great things on the website in terms of kind of tips for wellness. We've been spending a lot of time looking at how cultures around the world kind of create well-being, particularly Scandinavia. They have concepts like fika, and which is just take time and have a coffee and a cake with a friend, and you'll feel better. Go figure, it's that complicated. And my one last tip: you can get really good at opening doors with your elbow if you practice.
When I cross the street, I do that.
It's like the future handshake, right? Instead of doing handshakes.
That's my handshake.
You gotta have
heart. Oh, that's awesome.
You gotta have heart. Okay, Tracy, what's your website?
It's www.thesqa.re. So it's the square, but there's a dot between the A and the R. We have our own domain.
All right, that's great. Okay, so this is Ed in San Diego. That's Rob in London area by Heathrow, and Tracy on the Hudson overlooking the World Trade Center. Yeah. So thanks for being on Global TV. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks,
you.
Ed. And enjoy your birthday, my friend.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Ed.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. So kind. Thank you.
Bye-bye.